Ironland is the fastest growing micronation in history. Just ask Magnify. Ironland has gained over 200,000 citizens in a month. But could Ironland ever own the territory it occupies? I'm a real estate lawyer in the same state as Ironland, and today we're going to talk about one loophole that might allow Ironland to own its territory. Ironland started as a simple 12-foot circle around an iron statue, but now boasts 200,000 citizens and embassies in 30 countries, including Nepal, Finland, Canada, India, and more. I have been tasked with finding out whether Ironland can ever own its territory. And as with anything else in real estate, before you can look forward, you must first look back. Do you recognize this? You should, because this right here is Ironland. And this is a plat from 1915 as a result of a very long handwritten opinion from the Superior Court clerk. Some heirs of, I believe it was Frank Cox, were fighting over the land. And because of this, they divided up the land amongst a lot of people. And they discussed this alley number 1, which I've highlighted on the plat. And this is the alley in which Ironland is located. So this plat is from 1915. That's the first time I was able to see a visual representation on a recorded plat of Ironland. And it's been revised a couple times over the years, including, let's see, this time in 2005. So you'll see here that by the time this was recorded in 2005, Ironland was already there. There's a statue still in alley number 1. And then again in 13, another revision because they found an error in the one from 2005, but still. Ironland's sitting right there. So what I'm hoping is that we can find a way that they've got to rename this from Flatiron Artwork to Ironland. One thing that I was able to determine over the years is that alley number 1 and alley number 2, they're now called Wall Street, and they were dedicated to public use in 1925. Right now, because the city of Asheville owns the location where Ironland sits, that means it's more of a meeting place for the citizens of Ironland, kind of like having a birthday party at a public park, or more of a symbolic representation of everything that the micronation represents. I'm also really curious how the city of Asheville feels about Ironland. I think there's almost no way they haven't heard about it by now. In fact, just doing a quick Google search of Ironland in North Carolina, you can find a Wikipedia page. The statue has been renamed to be Ironland, so getting a lot of attention. Ultimately, if Ironland wants to own this territory, they're going to have to get it from the city of Asheville somehow. So what I have done is I went back in the public records and found instances of where the city of Asheville conveyed property either to a private entity or to a nonprofit to figure out how were they able to do that and what purposes were the conveyances for. So going back to 2020, and I only went back to 2020 because that alone was like 700 or 800 results. Out of even that many results, there have only been 7 times since January 1st, 2020, that the city of Asheville has conveyed property. So I've isolated those, and that kind of whittles down what we have to look at of recent examples of the city of Asheville conveying property. And the first one is actually near Ironland. The city of Asheville conveyed to Collaborative Partnership Properties 105 square feet of airspace for the purposes of building a balcony on the 3rd floor. Now, that's not necessarily what we're trying to do here with Ironland, so I had to keep going. And I was able to find that the city of Asheville in 2023, about a year ago, conveyed to a nonprofit corporation called KL Training Solutions a plot of land. Now, this was a half-acre tract of land, and it had a building on it. And the city of Asheville conveyed it to this nonprofit. It was for the express purpose that it was used by a nonprofit for public use of community development programs and some other activities that I've highlighted on the deed. So KL Training Solutions fit the bill for that. So the Asheville City Council adopted by a resolution that they were going to convey to KL Training Solutions for $1 this half-acre tract of land. So I think this is more analogous to what Ironland may be trying to do, because Ironland is not a for-profit entity. In fact, technically it's not an entity yet, but if it were to become one, it would not be for profit. And this statute here that's referenced in the deed 160A-279. This is where the city of Asheville got the right to convey the property, which says they may convey by private sale to an entity any real or personal property that it owns, as long as it's not made to a for-profit corporation. And they also have to follow some procedural guidelines in a different statute talking about private sale, which says, if you're going to dispose of property by a private sale, you have to meet at a council meeting to adopt a resolution. That resolution can say a lot of things, including a minimum price, but it doesn't have to. And then in our instance, the resolution does state a minimum price, $1, and the city council adopted this resolution saying that the city manager could convey the property to KL Training Solutions, and that the consideration for the conveyance was that set of conditions and restrictions I talked about, meaning nonprofit for community development purposes. So this is probably the avenue that would work best for Ironland. And one thing that I like to do whenever I'm researching something like this is where I started was not the law. I didn't start with the statutes. I started with when's the most recent time that the city of Asheville has conveyed property at all. And that's how you kind of get a good idea of what the city is willing to do or not. And then within those deeds, most often, their ability to convey is established by some paragraphs within the deed saying, this is the statute that allows us to do it. This is the resolution that we adopted. And then you've got a much smaller universe of things that you have to research to get to where you want to go. So there are a couple of legal hurdles that Ironland might face in trying to acquire the property. First being that it's not yet an entity of any kind. And then if it becomes an entity, it would need to be not-for-profit in order to use those procedures set forth in those other deeds. And then also you've got to get the city of Asheville to approve and adopt by a resolution at a city council meeting that they're willing to convey the property. All right, so how do you even do that? I thought, I wonder how this would work in my town. I live in Mooresville, which is about 2 hours away from Asheville, where Ironland is located. I thought, what if I just called the town of Mooresville up?
Okay, here we go.
So that's what I did. I called Commissioner Qualls with the town of Mooresville and said, let's say I had this crazy idea that I wanted to take a piece of property that was owned by the town of Mooresville and use it for a public purpose. Let's imagine it's a vacant lot and I wanted to do some sort of after-school activity like a sports program for kids that perhaps didn't have funding to be able to do any type of private sports. So it would be for the public purpose, for the community's enjoyment and development. And I thought, where would I even start? So Commissioner Qualls said something that I was not expecting, and it was that you should start by doing exactly what you've just done, which is call one of your commissioners or your mayor.
Okay, my name is Ron. You don't need to know my last name. Whoever wants to talk, go ahead, and we'll be out of here in a tight 15.
And I was truly expecting that she would say, go to the website, download this form, and then you're going to run it up the chain, and then you're going to go through all of these 100 steps, and then eventually we'll get to a meeting, and then you'll come and present it. Now, there will be steps involved, but she suggested starting with your elected officials first because they're going to be the best source of information about whether that piece of property is earmarked for some other purpose, whether it has any deed restrictions, whether someone else is already interested in the property for some other reason, and then even more broadly, what are the current aspirations and goals of the town's elected officials? Is this project something that your town is interested in and wants to support? So there's a lot of moving parts, and the elected officials have all of the access to the different departments and can help you navigate through those much more simply than if you had just started trying to fill out a form and get on the next agenda. Now, while you can do that, you may have a much more difficult time presenting a project that you're passionate about, and you may lose hope and faith if you're just trying to go the paperwork route. Another thing that she mentioned is perhaps someone has tried a project similar to this before that failed, and they can give you pointers on what you could propose differently to have more success this time. So good news, there is a legal pathway in North Carolina for Ironland to come to own its territory. One thing you should know is that the federal government does still have the power of eminent domain over the property, even if it comes to be owned by Ironland. But maybe, just maybe, there is a legal pathway to Ironland having full independence.